We're taking the blueprints from organizations where, failure isn't just an option, it's a catastrophe.
And we are stealing their most powerful yet most overlooked secret weapon.
Exactly. And it's not what you think.
No, we're not talking about some advanced AI or, groundbreaking new research. We're talking about something far simpler and, honestly, far more powerful.
Language.
Just language. Specifically, how these high-reliability organizations think NASA Mission Control or an ICU, how they literally engineer certainty out of pure chaos. They do it by replacing all that ambiguity and delay with standardized, repeatable dialogues.
So our mission for you, the listener, is really clear. We are going to analyze the specific communication systems that stop disasters before they happen and, really drive success.
We want to uncover the actual scripts that save lives and then show you how to bring that same kind of procedural clarity into your own critical moments.
Because when the stakes are high, a crisis, a critical project handoff, any moment of deep uncertainty, you just cannot afford to improvise. You need that simple pre-agreed phrase.
And that's the core tension right there, isn't it? The immense power of deliberately limiting your options when you're under stress. And there is no better example of this principle in action than Apollo 11.
Okay, let's set the scene.
Oh, yeah.
This is a hook that quite literally takes us to the moon. It's July 20, 1969. We're in the final minutes of the descent of the lunar module, the Eagle. Commander Neil Armstrong is manually flying this thing. He's hunting for a safe landing spot in the Sea of Tranquility, which, by the way, is turning out to be way rougher, way more full of boulders than anyone expected.
And the whole time, you've got Buzz Aldrin calling out these crucial flight numbers. The scene is tense. The atmosphere in the cockpit down in mission control, it's just laser focused. But the margins for error are razor thin.
They're running low on fuel. They're flying over this boulder field. Every single second counts. And then, with just a few thousand feet left to go, the Apollo guidance computer, the most complex bit of kit on the entire ship, it just suddenly throws a fit. A very loud, very sudden alarm.
Yeah.
And Armstrong calls it out immediately. You can hear it in the recordings. That contained urgency in his voice as he reports the exact code. 2102.
Now, you have to think about this. These astronauts are the absolute best in the world. They have trained for every single scenario you can imagine. They've memorized the manuals.
Right.
But this code, 1202, it's a corner case. Neither astronaut in that cockpit knows instantly what it means. And the real problem is they don't have time. We're talking seconds to debate it or look it up or try to figure it out.
But this is that critical communication hinge you were talking about.
It is. They immediately do the one thing high reliability teams are trained to do. You call out the signal, and then you push the job of interpreting it to the specialists on the ground.
So down in Houston, the guidance officer, a guy named Steve Bales, is listening. And suddenly this massive burden of interpretation just lands squarely on him and his team.
What is 1202? Is it a catastrophic failure?
Does it mean they have to abort the entire mission right now and fire themselves back into lunar orbit? The whole world is listening in.
A wrong call, or even a call that takes, 30 seconds too long? That could end the mission, or worse.
And what's so fascinating here is that the solution wasn't some, flash of genius in the moment. It was all in the preparation.
Completely preparatory. Bales didn't solve this alone. He had a specialist with him, Jack Garman, who had built this exhaustive crib sheet of all the known alarm codes.
Wow.
And Garman recognized it right away. 1201 and 1202 were specifically tied to the computer being overloaded.
Okay, we have to slow down there for a second because that technical detail is so important for understanding this solution. Why was it overloaded?
It was essentially being asked to multitask too much in those final, really stressful moments. It was getting data from the main landing radar, which it needed, but also, critically, from the rendezvous radar.
Which was supposed to be off.
Which was supposed to be off, but had been left on, so the computer was just being flooded with too many inputs at once.
So if it's overloaded, why isn't that a catastrophe? Why doesn't it just, blue screen?
Because of the design. The Apollo guidance computer was engineered with this really strict prioritization scheme. So when it got overloaded, it didn't crash. It just focused on the essential landing tasks, attitude control, descent rate, and it just shed the low priority, non-essential stuff.
So the alarm wasn't a failure signal?
No. The computer was actually doing its job perfectly. It was managing the data, protecting the core function. It was a design feature, not a bug. But almost no one knew that specific nuance in the heat of the moment.
And the whole time, the clock is just ticking. Aldrin is calling out fuel levels. The ship is still falling towards the surface.
Right. The descent is happening whether Houston answers or not. And Charlie Duke, the SAFCOM, the single voice who can talk to the crew, he doesn't give them a 5-minute technical lecture.
He doesn't start talking about radar data buffering or memory allocation.
No, he doesn't think out loud. He doesn't hedge his bets. He just takes the signal from Bales and transmits the standardized verdict immediately. We're going the ad alarm.
We're go on that alarm. 5 words. That line is a decision prepackaged. It's the most clarity you can get with the least possible delay. The cockpit didn't need the whole backstory.
No, they needed a clear, shared meaning. A binary choice, go or no go, and an unambiguous next step.
And the alarms kept happening, right?
Oh yeah, they recurred 4 more times, 1201, 1202, and every single time, the same simple, repeatable loop held strong. Cal out, interpretation, short decision, continue.
So the mission succeeded not because of some brilliant improvisation.
But because they fell back on their standard operating phrases. They fell to the level of their training.
And that leads us right into our first big principle. When the seconds matter, you don't rise to the level of your eloquence, you fall to the level of your standard phrases. It's all about the discipline of preparation. Let's really break down that closed-loop structure, because it's just a masterclass in managing risk. Our sources, they really emphasize that these repeatable dialogues are basically a defense mechanism. They're designed to beat the 2 silent killers of good communication, especially under stress.
And those are ambiguity and latency.
Right.
Ambiguity, as we're going to see later with the Tenerife disaster, is just, it's using the same words, but having them mean totally different things inside different people's heads.
And latency.
That's the time you lose. The microseconds, the minutes wasted on translating or interpreting or arguing about what somebody just said. In the Apollo 11 case, any latency at all could have meant they ran out of fuel before they touched down.
So how did that 4-step Apollo loop manage to just crush both ambiguity and latency at the same time?
By enforcing a really rigid structure. Let's walk through it again, but this time let's focus on the communication function of each step, not just the action.
Okay, so step 1, the call out. Armstrong naming the signal exactly, 1202 program alarm. That's precision. It just removes any ambiguity right away by naming the exact problem.
Step 2, assessment. The specialists on the ground, they figure out the meaning. It's a manageable data overload. And this step, it leverages distributed expertise, you know. The crew doesn't have to be an expert on every single alarm code.
They just need to be an expert at reliably transmitting the code to the people who are.
Exactly. Then step 3, the decision language. Charlie Duke gives that short, standard verdict. We're to go. This is what kills the latency. There's no room for debate, no need for clarification. It's just a binary signal. Go.
And that leads to step 4, the action. Keep flying. That whole loop took a vague, honestly terrifying impulse. What is this? Should we stop? And it turned it into an unmistakable procedural signal that triggered a predictable response.
And I think the genius of it is that the system worked because it recognized that during that peak stress, the crew just did not have the cognitive bandwidth to process a full technical analysis.
They needed clarity, not context.
Exactly. Which brings us to the contrast, right? The pitfalls of what our sources call everyday hiding.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because you contrast the NASA model with how most of us communicate in the office or at home. We hint, we assume, we sort of soften the edges of what we're really thinking to avoid social friction.
Oh, absolutely. And we all do this. We say something like, it's probably fine, when what we actually mean is, I don't have enough data to be sure, and I'm actually feeling pretty uneasy about this.
Or my favorite, let's just go ahead and try it,
Yeah.
which is code for, I think this is a bad idea, but I don't want to be the one who slows down the meeting or looks like I'm challenging the boss.
Right. And that ambiguity, it's a massive source of friction and, at the end of the day, failure. The whole point of the Apollo principle is that repeatable messages are about making meaning portable.
What do you mean by portable?
If you reuse a specific phrase over and over, it stops being just a suggestion. It becomes a signal. The whole team recognizes it instantly, and they know what action is tied to it. It's like code blue in a hospital.
Right. Nobody stands around debating what code blue means.
Exactly. It instantly dictates a set sequence of actions anywhere in the world. That meaning is portable. It doesn't need translation. You're offloading the cognitive burden of interpretation.
You stop relying on the other person's ability to somehow decode your vague hint into a clear directive.
That's the goal. So if you're listening to this, the crucial question you should ask before any critical communication is not, how can I sound clever or diplomatic? It should be, how can I say this in a way that is 100% unmistakable?
You have to standardize your verdicts. You have to rely on the script you agreed on beforehand. especially when things get stressful.
So let's get tactical. Let's talk about some of the tools derived right from this Apollo model that our sources recommend for this.
Okay, first up, install a call-out phrase for new risks. Just like Apollo had the alarm code, your team needs an agreed-upon signal that, a requirement has just shifted or a major dependency is broken.
Don't let new risks just sort of creep into the discussion. Name them. Something as simple as flag requirement changed. We need to pause and review.
I like that. Okay, second, get rid of the wishy-washy words when you're talking about commitments. Use one-word verdicts.
Oh, this is a big one. You have to ban vague terms like sure, okay, maybe, I guess, when you're confirming an action. For any decision that needs resources or a real sign-off, you stick to clear signals, go, no go, or the time-bound one, not yet, deadline in 1 hour.
It forces commitment.
And clarity. Third, you need to close the loop actively. Make confirmation normal, not awkward. This is the checkback line.
So after a big decision or a complex instruction, you just make a checkback mandatory.
Yeah, something as simple as, hey, can you repeat back what you think we're doing next? It just verifies that the decision I thought I sent is the decision you actually got. It catches those little misunderstandings before they turn into chaos.
Okay, and finally, a rule for tense meetings. The single voice rule.
Once a really complex or, contentious discussion is over, you pick one person to summarize the final decision in one single sentence.
And just the decision, right? Not the whole debate.
Just the outcome. This stops the group from splintering into 5 different interpretations of what was just decided. Everyone walks away with the same marching orders.
Closed loop, maximum precision, minimum ambiguity. That's the legacy of Apollo for communication.
Exactly.
The Apollo model is great.
Yep.
It worked because everyone, from the cockpit to mission control, they'd all agreed to basically subordinate their personal style to the procedure. But what happens when the delay, the latency, isn't technical but social?
Right.
When hierarchy or status or just the fear of looking stupid makes speaking up feel really risky.
That is the big challenge in any hierarchical environment, and there's no better example than healthcare. So we're going to shift from spaceflight now to the ICU. We're looking at organizations like Kaiser Permanente in the early 2000s where they were tackling this exact problem.
The problem of the critical handoff.
The critical handoff. It's a notorious communication black hole. You have a nurse who is with the patient constantly, right? They hold the full shifting story, the subtle trends, the patient's mood, the minute-to-minute changes.
They have the narrative.
They have the narrative. And they're trying to give this information to a physician who is often tired, busy, and has been trained to just demand the headline, the executive summary.
So you have this mismatch, narrative training versus headline training.
And that mismatch creates hesitation. And hesitation means critical time leaks away.
Yeah.
A junior nurse calling a senior physician at 3 a.m. They might instinctively feel like they have to soften the urgency or apologize for waking them up or over-explain everything before they get to the main point.
Right. That social tax on urgency, it can be lethal.
It is. They might spend 2 minutes talking about the patient's history when the urgent point is that their blood pressure just plummeted. That 2 minutes is latency introduced by social anxiety, not by bad tech.
So what was the fix?
Well, researchers like Michael Leonard and Doug Bonacum, they saw this hesitation and realized they needed a structural solution. So they looked outside of healthcare specifically to the military and aviation, which had already solved this kind of briefing problem decades ago.
And the structured solution they landed on was SBAR.
SBAR, Situation Background Assessment Recommendation. And what this framework does is it forces the person communicating to structure their thinking before they even pick up the phone. It's a cognitive discipline.
Let's run through an example. What's the difference?
Okay, so imagine a traditional unstructured call. It might sound something like this. Hi, doctor. Sorry to bother you. It's about Mrs. Smith in room 412. She's looking a bit pale, and her vitals are a little off from a couple hours ago. And I gave her the pain meds, but she's still really restless. And I just wanted to check if you thought maybe we should increase her oxygen.
That's a mess. That's forcing the doctor to try and pull the signal out of all that noise in real time. It's high latency, high ambiguity.
Exactly. Now imagine the SBR script situation. Mrs. Smith in 412 is hypotensive. Blood pressure is 80/40, down from 1280 an hour ago.
Straight to the point.
Background. She's 2 days post-op for a hip replacement, has a history of mild cardiac issues, was stable until an hour ago. Assessment. I believe she may be going into septic shock or has an internal bleed.
And then the big one.
Recommendation. I need you to come to the room now, and I recommend we start a rapid IV fluid bolus immediately.
That's transformative. It establishes the context, names the risk, and critically, it dictates the required action.
Right.
But as you said, even with that perfect script, a junior person might still hesitate on that or the recommendation.
Right. They might fear challenging a tired, high-status senior, and that's the pivotal insight the teams at Kaiser had. The hardest conversations are always the socially expensive ones.
The default is to politely suggest, not demand.
So to get over that, they added something that was like organizational armor. They added critical language, a protected phrase that carried known urgency and, importantly, known institutional backing.
And that repeatable phrase was, it was stunningly simple. I need you now.
4 words. But look at why they're so effective. It names the urgency without any drama or apology.
There's no negotiation in that phrase. It gets rid of the whole debate between soon versus now.
And crucially, the organization agreed beforehand that when this phrase is used, the person who hears it must drop everything and respond immediately. It's not a personal request anymore.
It's the execution of a binding institutional contract.
Exactly. It gives the speaker permission to be urgent without fearing professional blowback.
Which brings us to the deeper lesson here. Most communication failures, especially when it comes to escalation, they're not because somebody lacks the right technical words. It's because they lack the permission to say the clear, difficult thing.
The default mode is always hint and hope, and that just fails completely when you have power imbalances.
Silence is the easiest path.
It is. So to overcome that, the repeatable message has to be engineered. It must be role safe. A junior person can say it to the CEO without getting fired, and it has to be action-linked. The phrase automatically triggers a predictable, non-negotiable response. I need you now. Checks both of those boxes.
So for anyone listening, if you want to change outcomes on your team, you have to start by scripting the conversations people are avoiding because they're socially expensive.
Don't worry about scripting your weekly status update. Script the hard stuff. The escalation, the disagreement, the urgency, the refusal to accept more work.
Let's get tactical with this. How can you apply this escalation logic at work?
First, create your own protected urgency phrase. Pick one single sentence that means definitively drop everything. It's a pre-agreed code word. In a project meeting, maybe it's just, this is an urgent stop, we must pause. And that phrase carries the full weight of the team's agreement.
Okay. Second, you could mandate SBR for any big escalation. If you have to ask someone to stop what they're doing or change a key decision, you have to structure your argument first.
Situation, background, assessment, recommendation. It ensures the recommendation is based on evidence and it's clearly articulated.
Third, and I like this one, write your recommendations as a verb plus a time-bound deadline.
This kills ambiguity. Don't say, we should probably decide on this soon. Be specific. Approve this contract by 3 p.m. today. Or the code review must happen before tomorrow's stand-up. It forces action.
And finally, replace all that vague, polite language. Things like just checking in or I was just wondering.
Yeah, replace it with clear, unambiguous concern language. I'm concerned about the scope creep because it threatens our deadline. Or I'm concerned about this data because we missed a validation step. Clarity, delivered through a repeatable script, it just eliminates that social tax of ambiguity.
Okay, we've seen how these messages save lives in a technical crisis with Apollo and in a social hierarchy with Kaiser. Now we have to turn to what happens when these rules completely break down.
We're moving from success to the most profound example of catastrophic communication failure in aviation history. The Tenerife disaster of 1977.
It's still the deadliest accident in aviation. 583 people lost their lives when 2 Boeing 747s collided on a single runway.
It is the ultimate object lesson in the cost of using non-standard language and casual affirmations.
The setup was a total perfect storm, and it was all driven by external pressure. There was a bomb threat at a nearby airport, so this small airport on Tenerife Las Rodeas was suddenly just overwhelmed with diverted traffic.
And the airport was not equipped for it. It had one runway, very few taxiways, no ground radar, and then, critically, this massive thick fog rolled in. It completely blinded the control tower and the pilots.
On that one runway were 2 giants, KLM Flight 4805, flown by Captain Van Zanten, who was the highest status pilot imaginable. He was KLM's chief flying instructor, the face of their ad campaigns.
And he was under immense time pressure. The diversion had eaten up his time, and his duty limits were getting close, which meant he'd have to stop for the night if he didn't take off soon.
The other plane was Pan Am Flight 1736, another 747, taxiing on that same runway, trying to find its exit in 0 visibility.
The whole failure begins with the KLM cockpit using non-standard phrasing. The first officer sends a message meant to say, "We're ready for takeoff." but he phrases it non-standardly. He says, "We are now at takeoff."
Which sounds similar, but it isn't the same.
It's not the same at all. "We are now at takeoff" suggests they are starting the takeoff, not that they're positioned and waiting for clearance. This one deviation from standard language was the first fatal ambiguity.
And the controller's response just made it so much worse.
He replied with a casual, non-standard word, "Okay."
Which is not standard ATC language.
Not at all. In that high-stakes world, "okay" is totally insufficient. It should have been followed by a full clearance or definitive word like "roger" or "acknowledge." That casual "okay" just reinforced the KLM captain's mistaken belief that he could go.
But the controller did add the critical instruction after that, right? He did. He said, "Stand by for takeoff. I will call you." This clearly meant, do not go. But at that exact same moment, the Pan Am crew, still lost in the fog, was transmitting on the radio.
So there was interference.
A loud, piercing screech in the KLM cockpit, and investigators believe that screech completely erased the standby instruction.
So in the KLM cockpit, the captain hears the "okay." He misinterprets his own crew's non-standard message as permission, and then he misses the crucial hold order because of the radio noise.
You had two totally different realities existing in two different heads at the same time.
And with the pressure mounting, the KLM captain just advances the throttles. The takeoff roll begins.
And this is where the internal safety mechanism failed because of hierarchy. The flight engineer, a lower status crew member, he actually voiced his concern. He asked, "Wait, is the Pan Am not clear of the runway?"
He questioned it. He did. But the captain, driven by his status, his confidence, his need to get going, he just answered with certainty and overrode the concern. He continued the takeoff.
That chain of errors. The non-standard language, the casual "okay," the radio interference, and then the high-status captain ignoring his junior crew member. It was an unbreakable chain.
Yeah. And seconds later, the fog lifted just enough for them to see the impossible. The Pan Am 747 still on the runway right in front of them. The collision was inevitable.
This tragedy just highlights that huge difference between the almost right word and the right word.
Yeah.
These repeatable dialogues, they're not just tedious scripts. They are agreements that create a shared singular reality.
That casual "okay" created two different realities. One where the plane was cleared to go and one where it was ordered to wait. And that ambiguity cost 583 lives.
Aviation completely changed its communication standards after this. They recognized that trusting improvisation is a lethal flaw.
And the fixes were all procedural. Tighter phraseology, standardized roles, who says what and when, and making mandatory readbacks the universal rule. If I give you an instruction, you have to repeat it back to me exactly as you heard it.
It verifies meaning instantly.
And you think about the fog in our own work, right? The casual "sure," that means "I heard you," but doesn't actually mean "I agree to do it," or the manager who says, "let's get this done soon," but never sets a date.
If your words don't have one phrase, one meaning, you're introducing a point of catastrophic failure.
Especially under pressure.
So let's turn this into tactical takeaways. Let's focus on the fix, not just the failure.
Okay. First, adopt a strict one phrase, one meaning rule for your high-stakes moments. For approvals, you use the word "approved." For commitment, "I commit." For refusal, "refused." You don't freestyle these critical verbs.
You have to eliminate the chance that a lightning bug word gets mistaken for lightning.
Exactly. Second, you have to use the readback line anytime critical information is exchanged. It's simple, it's professional, and it's about precision, not paranoia.
Just saying, "To confirm, can you repeat back the 3 action items you're taking away?" It's a mandatory closed loop.
Third, standardize your decisions with the 3-part decision script. We're often good at making the decision, but terrible at the execution part. This script forces clarity.
What's the
So
script?
if the decision is "hair," we are completing it by "ha." And you, owner's name, own the outcome. Decision, deadline, owner, simple.
And finally, you install a hinge phrase for uncertainty, one that invites correction without making people defensive.
Right. Something like, "I might be wrong here. Tell me what you heard the deadline was." Or, "This is my current understanding. Please correct me if I missed a step." It shifts the focus from who's right to making sure the system is right.
We spent a lot of time on crisis management and disaster prevention. But these repeatable messages are just as important when you use them as an engine for continuous improvement and culture change.
Absolutely. Let's look outside of crisis response and into heavy manufacturing. We're going to Alcoa in 1987. Paul O'Neill is the new CEO.
And he's addressing Wall Street analysts, investors, people who are expecting to hear about earnings per share, profit margins, cost cutting. The usual stuff.
But O'Neill does something completely audacious. He opens his very first speech with a line nobody expected. "I want to talk to you about worker safety."
The room just fell silent. Analysts thought he was joking or had gone off script.
He treated the goal of 0 injuries not as some, moral slogan on a poster, but as the company's absolute non-negotiable leading value. It was the central measure of how well the entire company was performing.
And he framed safety as a perfect communication system. Why safety?
Because O'Neill understood that if you want to get to 0 injuries, you have to have perfect operational communication. You have to know exactly what is happening, where it's happening, and why instantly. He used safety as the one universal metric that forced everyone into a perfect, repeatable dialogue.
So he converted that vague value, safety first, into a rigid, repeatable system.
He did. And the system was based on one radical, non-negotiable rule for every single facility in the world. You had to report all injuries and incidents within 24 hours.
And the report had to include a root cause analysis and a specific corrective action plan.
Yes. That structure is key. It forces action, not just explanation. The energy is instantly focused on fixing the system, not on debating the injury or blaming someone.
24 hours is unbelievably fast for a huge global company. He made speed and clarity the standard.
And what's critical here is that this 24-hour rule created this specific hinge moment for every single manager. It separated the people who just said safety mattered from the people who actually let the communication system for safety run their business.
The default in most companies is to delay. Gather details, protect the story, smooth out the edges.
O'Neill mandated the exact opposite. Rapid public reporting became the engine for improvement. And not just in safety, but across every single metric.
And it flattened the hierarchy. Why?
Because the policy did the confronting, not a supervisor's personal courage. If a manager didn't report an incident in 24 hours, O'Neill didn't have to yell at them. The system failed, and that failure was public and immediate.
The repeatable dialogue forced the organization to learn fast. The language was standard, the feedback loops were rapid.
Exactly. Now let's pivot from that management level down to the frontline worker and look at Toyota and the idea of Jidoka automation with a human touch.
Toyota's production system is famous for being disciplined. But the discipline is designed to make problems visible, right? Not just to make workers into robots.
Precisely. The biggest problem most factories have is that a frontline worker sees a small defect, a faulty bolt, a messy step, and they just decide it's not worth the trouble to report. They push the problem downstream.
Where it gets much more expensive to fix.
Exponentially more expensive. So Toyota designed the opposite incentive with the and-on cord. It's a signaling system, a rope or a button, that gives any worker, regardless of status, the ability to call for immediate help the second they spot an abnormality.
So the core repeatable message is simple. We have a problem here. Help is needed now.
And there's a popular misconception that pulling the cord instantly stops the whole assembly line.
That's only the last resort.
Right. The signal just triggers immediate support from a team leader. The line only stops if the problem can't be fixed within a really short defined time window.
The communication is the feature.
It is. It's a non-negotiable response. The team leader doesn't debate the worker's judgment. They just show up. Toyota created a culture where raising a problem isn't a disruption, it is the job.
And this repeatable signal, it's a protected phrase that triggers a non-negotiable response. And the outcome is learning and problem solving. It's not blame.
No blame.
And that idea, the protected phrase that gives you the right to interrupt, that connects perfectly back to healthcare, doesn't it? To Peter Pronavost's work at Johns Hopkins on central line infections.
It's the exact same principle. Pronovost saw that the safety steps to prevent these deadly infections weren't a secret. Doctors are just skipping them.
Because of the hectic, high-status, hierarchical environment, it's too easy for a busy attending physician to just bypass a small step in a checklist.
Exactly. So they introduced a simple 5-point checklist. But just having the checklist wasn't enough. The real fix was the repeatable dialogue that protected the checklist.
So nurses were instructed to run the checklist and to insist that every single step was completed.
And that hinge moment was scripted. If the doctor reached for the catheter kit before, say, putting on sterile drapes, the nurse used neutral, process-oriented language to stop them.
So they wouldn't say, "Doctor, you forgot the drape," because that's a social challenge.
It is. Instead, the language was simply, "We're not ready to proceed until the checklist is satisfied."
That's profound. That repeatable dialogue creates an agreed-upon, organizationally supported right of interruption. It makes the process the authority, not the individual.
It removes that social improvisation tax. And the final synthesis of all of this is simple. Scripts beat hierarchy. They make safety and correction procedural, which eliminates the need for personal courage every single time.
So let's define our final tactical takeaways here, based on operationalizing these stop phrases from Toyota and Johns Hopkins.
First, you have to pre-wire a stop phrase. Agree beforehand with your whole team what happens when someone says the magic words. For example, if I say time out, we pause instantly and clarify. No debate until we're aligned.
And that agreement has to be explicit.
Has to be. Second, always use neutral interruption language. Like the nurses did, use process language, not accusation language. Instead of, you forgot X, you say, I'm going to pause us. Here's what I'm worried the process is missing.
You're flagging the system, not the person.
Exactly. Third, create a business version of the and-on phrase. This is your signal for immediate risk. Stop, customer impact imminent. Or halt, this won't scale. And you have to define the SLA, the service level agreement. If that phrase is used, a decision maker must respond within, say, 10 minutes.
And finally, for managing failures, use that rigid Alcoa reporting template.
Standardize the communication of bad news with zero ambiguity. Event root cause corrective action owner plus date. It focuses all the energy on fixing the system, not debating the mistake.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've gone from the brink of disaster on the moon to the systems that prevent failure in hospitals. Let's just quickly synthesize the 4 big lessons we've pulled out here.
Okay. 1. Trust the script, not your wits, Apollo. Closed-loop communication is your best defense against ambiguity and delay when you're under stress. You have to execute the pre-agreed language. It's just faster and safer than making it up as you go.
2. Flatten the hierarchy with contracts. Kaiser Pronovost. These protected phrases, they provide social armor. They give a junior person explicit permission to challenge or escalate to a senior person without all that social friction. It makes confrontation procedural.
3. Demand precision for safety. Tenerife. Repeatability is an agreement that prevents catastrophic misunderstanding. If the decision is high stakes, you need mandatory verification and one phrase that means one and only one thing.
And 4. Engineer learning, not blame. Alcoa Toyota. Standardized rapid reporting and that protected right to interrupt, your and-on cord, they're the primary engines of continuous improvement. They make problems visible the second they happen.
The final maxim that really ties all of these systems together, whether it's spaceflight or a factory floor, is this. Clarity isn't some talent you're born with. It's a loop you practice and you reinforce through repeatable dialogue.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take away this week.
We've established that these scripts have to cover the socially expensive moments, the conversations you avoid because you don't want to seem difficult.
So think about that one lingering conflict or that unchecked scope creep or that single unspoken assumption that is just poisoning the well on your most important project right now.
What if the most effective, most human, and actually least disruptive thing you could do this week is to just write a single, repeatable sentence that gives you explicit permission to address that issue? Consider the ultimate long-term cost of politeness, and then write your script to solve for it.
That's the power of procedural clarity. We hope this deep dive into the unspoken power of repeatable messages gives you the tools to engineer a little more certainty in your own life and work.